Section 19 of the Endeavour Journal of Sir Joseph Banks. Journal from 25 August 1768 to 12 July 1771 by Joseph Banks. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Gail Timmerman Vaughan. Section 19. Manners and Customs of South Sea Islands, 1769. Appeared after 14 August 1769. Part 1. We have now seen 17 islands in these seas, and been ashore upon 5 of the most principal ones. Of these, the language, manners, and customs have agreed almost exactly. I should therefore be tempted to conclude that those of the islands we have not seen differ not material at least from them. The account I shall give of them is taken chiefly from Tahiti, where I was well acquainted with their most interior policy, as I found them to be a people so free from deceit that I trusted myself among them almost as freely as I could do in my own country, sleeping continually in their houses in the woods, with not so much as a single companion. Whether or not I am right in judging their manners and customs to be general throughout these seas, anyone who gives himself the trouble of reading this journal through will be as good a judge as myself. All the islands I have seen are very populous, all along the sea-coast, where are generally large flats covered with a vast many breadfruit and their coconut trees. Here are houses almost every 50 yards, with their little plantations of plantains, the tree that makes their cloth, etc. But the inland parts are totally uninhabited, except in the valleys, where are rivers, and even there are but a small proportion of people to what live upon the flats. They are of a larger size than Europeans, all excellently made, and some handsome, both men and women. The only bad feature they have is their noses, which are in general flat. But to balance this, their teeth are almost without exception even and white to perfection, and the eyes of the women especially are full of expression and fire. In colour they differ very much. Those of inferior rank who are obliged in the exercise of their professions, fishing especially, to be much exposed to the sun and air, are of a dark brown. The superiors again, who spend most of their time in their houses, under shelter, are seldom browner, the women especially, than that kind of brunette which many in Europe prefer to the finest white and red. Complexion, indeed, they seldom have, though some I have seen show a blush very manifestly. This is perhaps owing to the thickness of their skins, but that fault is in my opinion well compensated by their infinite smoothness, much superior to anything I have met with in Europe. The men, as I have said before, are rather large. I have measured one 6 feet 3½ The superior women are also large as Europeans, but the inferior sort generally small, some very small owing possibly to their early amours, which they are much more addicted to than their superiors. Their hair is almost universally black and rather coarse. This the women wear always cropped short round their ears. The men, on the other hand, wear it in many various ways, sometimes cropping it short, sometimes letting it grow very long and tying it at the top of their heads, or letting it hang loose on their shoulders, etc. Their beards they also wear in many different fashions, always, however, plucking out a large part of them, and keeping that is left very clean and neat. Both sexes eradicate every hair from under their armpits, and they look upon it as a great mark of uncleanliness in us that we do not do the same. During our stay in these islands, I saw some not more than 5 or 6, who were a total exception to all I have said before. They were whiter even than us, but of a dead colour, like that of the nose of a white horse. Their eyes, hair, eyebrows, and beards were also white. They were universally short-sighted, and looked almost unwholesome, their skins scurfy and scaly, and eyes often full of rheum. As they had no 2 of them any connections with one another, I conclude that the difference of colour, etc., was totally accidental, and did not at all run in families. So much for their persons. I shall now mention their method of painting their bodies, or tattoo, as it is called in their language. This they do by inlaying the colour of black under their skins, in such a manner as to be indelible. Every one is marked thus in different parts of his body, according maybe to his humour, or different circumstances of his life. Some have ill-designed figures of men, birds, or dogs, but they more generally have this figure Z, either simply, as the women are generally marked with it, on every joint of their fingers and toes, and often round the outside of their feet, or in different figures of it as square, circles, crescents, etc., which both sexes have on their arms and legs. In short, they have an infinite diversity of figures in which they place this mark, and some of them, we were told, had significations, but this we never learnt to our satisfaction. Their faces are in general left without any marks. I did not see more than one instance to the contrary. Some few old men had the greatest part of their bodies covered with large patches of black, which ended in deep indentations, like coarse imitations of flame. These, we were told, were not natives of Tahiti, but came from a low island called Nuuora. Though they are so various in the application of the figures, I have mentioned that both the quantity and situation of them seems to depend entirely upon the humour of each individual. Yet all the islanders I have seen, except those of Ohitaroa, agree in having all their buttocks covered with a deep black. Over this most have arches drawn, one over another, as high as their short ribs, which are often 1/4 of an inch broad, and neatly worked on their edges with indentations, etc. These arches are their great pride. Both men and women show them with great pleasure, whether as a beauty or a proof of their perseverance and resolution in bearing pain, I cannot tell, as the pain of doing this is almost intolerable, especially the arches upon the loins, which are so much more susceptible of pain than the fleshy buttocks. Their method of doing it I will now describe. The colour they use is lamp black, which they prepare from the smoke of a kind of oily nuts used by them instead of candles. This is kept in coconut shells and mixed with water occasionally for use. Their instruments for pricking this under the skin are made of bone or shell, flat. The lower part of this is cut into sharp teeth, from 3 to 20, according to the purposes it is to be used for, and the upper fastened to a handle. These teeth are dipped into the black liquor, and then drove by sharp quick blows struck upon the handle with a stick for that purpose, into the skin so deep that every stroke is followed by a small quantity of blood, or serum at least, and the part so marked remains sore for many days before it heals. I saw this operation performed on the 5th of July on the buttocks of a girl about 14 years of age. For some time she bore it with great resolution, but afterwards began to complain, and in a little time grew so outrageous that all the threats and force her friends could use could hardly oblige her to endure it. I had occasion to remain in an adjoining house an hour at least after this operation began, and yet went away before it was finished, though this was the blacking of only one side of her buttocks, the other having been done some weeks before. It is done between the ages of 14 and 18, and so essential it is that I have never seen one single person of years of maturity without it. What can be a sufficient inducement to suffer so much pain is difficult to say. Not one Indian, though I have asked hundreds, would ever give me the reason for it. Possibly superstition may have something to do with it. Nothing else, in my opinion, could be a sufficient cause for so apparently absurd a custom. As for the smaller marks on the fingers, arms, etc., they may be indented only for beauty. Our European ladies have found the convenience of patches, and something of that kind is more useful here, where the best complexions are much inferior to theirs, and yet whiteness is esteemed the first essential in beauty. They are certainly as cleanly a people as any under the sun, except in their lousiness. Every one of them wash their whole bodies in the running water as soon as they rise in the morn, at noon, and before they sleep at night. And if they have not such water near their houses, as often happens, they will go a good way for it. As for the lice, had they the means only, they would certainly be free from them, as any inhabitants of so warm a climate could be. Those to whom combs were given proved this, for those who I was best acquainted with kept themselves very clear while we stayed by the use of them. As for their eating lice, it is a custom which none but children, and those of the inferior people, can be charged with. Their cloths also, as well as their persons, are kept almost without spot or stain. The superior people spend much of their time in repairing, dyeing, etc., the cloth, which seems to be a genteel amusement for the ladies here, as it is in Europe. Their clothes are either of a kind of cloth made of the bark of a tree, or mats of several different sorts. Of all these, and their manner of making them, I shall speak in another place. Here I shall only mention their method of covering and adorning their persons, which is of course most various, as they never form dresses, or sew any two things together. It must be a piece of cloth which is generally 2 yards wide and 11 long, is sufficient clothing for anyone, and this they put on in 1,000 different ways, often very genteel. Their dress of form, however, is, in the women, a kind of petticoat, parot, wrapped round their hips, and reaching about the middle of their legs. 1, 2, or 3 pieces of thick cloth, about 2½ yards long, and 1 wide, to buta, through a hole in the middle of which they put their heads, and suffer the sides of it to hang before and behind them, the open edges serving to give their arms liberty of moving. Round the ends of this, about as high as their waists, are tied 2 or 3 large pieces of thin cloth, and sometimes another or 2 thrown over their shoulders loosely, for the rich seem to show their greatest pride in wearing a large quantity of cloth. The dress of the men differs but little from this. Their bodies are rather more bare, and instead of the petticoat they have a piece of cloth passed between their legs and round their waists, maro, which keeps up the strictest rules of decency, and at the same time gives them rather more liberty to use their limbs than the women's dress will allow. Thus much of the richer people. Poorer sort have only a small allowance of cloth given them from the tribes or families to which they belong, and must use that to the best advantage. It is reckoned no shame for any part of the body to be exposed to view, except those which all mankind hide. It was no uncommon thing for the richest of the men to come to see us with a large quantity of cloth rolled round their loins, and all the rest of their bodies naked, though the cloth wrapped round them was sufficient to have clothed a dozen people. The women at sunset always bared their bodies down to the navel, which seemed to be a kind of easy undress to them, as to our ladies to pull off any finery that has been used during the course of the day, and change it for a loose gown and capuchin. Both sexes shade their faces from the sun with little bonnets of coconut leaves, which they make occasionally in a very few minutes. Some have these made of fine matting, but that is less common. Of matting they have several sorts, some very fine, which is used in exactly the same manner as cloth for their dresses, chiefly in rainy weather, as their cloth will not bear the least wet. Ornaments they have very few. They are very fond of earrings, but wear them only in one ear. When we came, they had them of their own, made of shell, stone, berries, red peas, and some small pearls, which they wore 3 tied together. But our beads very quickly supplied their place. They are also very fond of flowers, especially of the Cape jasmine, of which they have great plenty planted near their houses. These they stick into the holes of their ears and into their hair, if they have enough of them, which is but seldom. The men wear feathers, often the tails of tropic birds, stuck upright in their hair. They have also a kind of wigs, made upon one string of the hair of men, dogs, or coconut strings, which they tie under their hair upon the backs of their heads. I have seen them also wear whimsical garlands made of a variety of flowers, stuck into a piece of the rind of plantain, or of scarlet peas, stuck upon a piece of wood with gum. But these are not common. Their great pride of dress seems to be centred almost in what they call tamu, which is human hair plaited, scarce thicker than common thread. Of this I may easily affirm that I have pieces above a mile in length, worked upon an end, without a single knot. I have seen 5 or 6 of such pieces wound round the head of one woman, the effect of which, if done with taste, was most becoming. Thus much of their common dresses. Their dancing dresses I have described in the island of Ulhiatia, and that of the Haiva I shall when I come to their morning ceremonies. They have also several more suited to particular ceremonies, which I had not the opportunity of seeing, though I was very desirous, as the singular taste of those promised much novelty, at least if not something worth imitation, in whatever they take their pains with. I had almost forgot the oil with which they anoint their heads. Manoe it is called in their language, a custom more disagreeable to Europeans than any other among them. This is made of coconut oil in which some sweet woods or flowers are infused. The oil is most commonly very rancid, and consequently the wearers of it smell most disagreeably. At first we found it so, but very little use reconciled me, at least, very completely to it. These people are free from all smells of mortality, and surely rancid as their oil is, it must be preferred to the odoriferous perfume of toes and armpits, so frequent in Europe. The houses, or rather dwellings of these people, are admirably calculated for the continual warmth of their climate. They do not build them in villages or towns, but separate each from the other according to the size of the estate the owner of the house possesses. They are always in the woods, and no more ground is cleared away for each house than is just sufficient to hinder the dropping of the branches from rotting the thatch with which they are covered, so that you step from the house immediately under shade, and that the most beautiful imaginable. No country can boast such delightful walks as this. The whole plains where the people live are covered with groves of breadfruit and coconut trees, without underwood. These are intersected in all directions by paths, which go from one house to the other, so the whole country is a shade, than which nothing can be more grateful in a climate where the sun has so powerful an influence. They are built without walls, so that the air cooled by the shade of the trees has free access, in whatever direction it happens to blow. I shall describe one of the middle size, which will give you an idea of all the rest, as they differ scarce at all in fashion. Its length was 24 feet, breadth 11, extreme height 8.5, height of the eaves 3.5. It consisted of nothing more than a thatched roof of the same form as in England, supported by 3 rows of posts or pillars, one on each side and one in the middle. The floor was covered some inches deep with soft hay, upon which here and there were laid mats for the convenience of setting down. This is almost the only furniture, as few houses have more than one stool, which is the property of the master of the family, and constantly used by him, and most are entirely without. These houses serve them chiefly to sleep in, and make their cloths, etc. They generally eat in the open air under the shade of the next tree, if the weather is not rainy. The mats which serve them to set upon in the daytime are also their beds at night. The cloth which they wear in the day serves for covering, and a little wooden stool, blocks of wood, or a bundle of cloth for a pillow. Their order is generally this. Near the middle lay the master of the house and his wife, and with them the rest of the married people, next to them the unmarried women, next to them at some distance the unmarried men. The servants, tutus, as they are called, generally lay in the open air, or if it rains come just within shelter. Thus all privacy is banished, even from those actions which the decency of Europeans keep most secret. This, no doubt, is the reason why both sexes express the most indecent ideas in conversation, without the least emotion. In this their language is very copious, and they delight in such conversation beyond any other. Chastity, indeed, is but little valued, especially among the middling people. If a wife is found guilty of a breach of it, her only punishment is a beating from her husband. Notwithstanding this, some of the eres, or chiefs, are, I believe, perfectly virtuous. They, indeed, though they have no decency in conversation, have privacy. Most or all of them have small houses, which when they move are tied upon their canoes. These have walls made of coconut leaves, etc. In them they constantly sleep, man and wife, generally lifting them off from their canoes and placing them on the ground in any situation they think proper. Besides these, there are another kind of houses much larger. One in our neighbourhood measured length 162 feet, breadth 28.5, height of one in the middle row of pillars 18. These we conjectured to be common to all the inhabitants of the district, and raised and kept up by their joint labour. Of use may be for any meetings or consultations, for the reception of any visitants of consequence, etc. Such we have also seen used as dwelling houses by the very principal people, some of them very much larger than this, which I have here described. In the article of food, these happy people may also be said to be exempt from the curse of our forefather. Scarcely can it be said that they earn their bread with the sweat of their brow, when their chiefest sustenance, breadfruit, is procured with no more trouble than that of climbing a tree and pulling it down. Not that the trees grow here spontaneously, but if a man should in the course of his lifetime plant 10 such trees, which if well done might take the labour of an hour or thereabouts, he would as completely fulfil his duty to his own as well as future generations, as we natives of less temperate climates can do by toiling in the cold of winter to sow, and in the heat of summer to reap, the annual produce of our soil, which when once gathered into the barn must again be re-sowed and re-reaped, as often as the colds of winter or the heats of summer return to make such labour disagreeable. O fortunati nimium sua si bona nurunt, may most truly be applied to these people. Benevolent nature has not only supplied them with necessaries, but with abundance of superfluities. The sea about them in the neighbourhood of which they always live supplies them with a vast variety of fish, better than what is generally met with between the tropics, but these they get not without some trouble. Everyone desires to have them, and there is not enough for all. Though while we remained in these seas we saw above species more perhaps than our own island can boast of. I speak now only of what is more properly called fish, but almost everything which comes out of the sea is eat and esteemed by these people, shellfish, lobsters, crabs, even sea insects, and what the seamen call blubbers of many kinds, conduce to their support. Some of the last, indeed, that are of a very tough nature, are prepared by suffering them to stink. Custom will make almost any meat palatable, and the women especially are very fond of this. though after they eat it, I confess, I was not extremely fond of their company. Besides the breadfruit, the earth almost spontaneously produces coconuts, bananas of 13 sorts, the best I ever eat, plantains, but indifferent, a fruit not unlike an apple, which when ripe is very pleasant, sweet potatoes, yams, cocoas, another kind of arum known in the East Indies by the name of arum blanc, a fruit known there by the name of uge malak, and reckoned most delicious. Sugar cane, which the inhabitants eat raw, a root of the salep kind called by the inhabitants pea, the root also of a plant called ethi, and a fruit in a pod, like a large hull of a kidney bean, which when roasted eats much like chestnuts, and is called ahi. Besides a fruit of a tree which they call huara, in appearance like a pineapple, the fruit of a tree called by them nono, the roots and perhaps leaves of a fern, and the roots of a plant called thieve, which four eat only by the poorer sort of people in times of scarcity. For tame animals they have hogs, fowls, and dogs, which latter we learned to eat from them, and few were there of the nicest of us but allowed that a South Sea dog was next to an English lamb. This indeed must be said in their favour, that they live entirely upon vegetables. Probably our dogs in England would not eat half as well. Their pork is certainly most excellent, though sometimes too fat. Their fowls are not a bit better, rather worse, maybe, than ours at home, often very tough. Though they seem to esteem flesh very highly, yet, in all the islands, I have seen the quantity they have of it is very unequal to the number of their people. It is therefore seldom used among them. Even their most principal people have it not every day, or even week, though some of them had pigs that we saw quartered upon different estates, as we send cocks to walks in England. When any of these kill a hog, it seems to be divided almost equally among all his dependents, himself taking little more than the rest. Vegetables are their chief food, and of these they eat a large quantity. Cookery seems to have been little studied here. They have only two methods of applying fire, broiling or baking, as we called it, which is done thus. A hole is dug in depth and size, according to what is to be prepared, seldom exceeding a foot in depth. In this a heap is made of wood and stones alternately laid. Fire is then put to it, which by the time it is consumed the wood has heated the stones sufficiently, just enough to discolour anything which touches them. The heap is then divided. Half is left in the hole, the bottom of which is paved with them. On them any kind of provisions are laid, always neatly wrapped up in leaves. The hole is then covered with leaves, on which are laid the remaining hot stones, then leaves again, 3 or 4 inches thick, and over them any ashes, rubbish, or dirt that lays at hand. In this situation it remains about 2 hours, in which time I have seen a middling hog very well done. Indeed, I am of opinion that victuals dressed this way are more juicy, if not more equably done, than by any of our European methods. Large fish more especially. Breadfruit cooked in this manner becomes soft, and something like a boiled potato, though not quite so farinaceous as a good one, yet more so than the middling sort. Of this 2 or 3 dishes are made by beating it with a stone pestle till it make a paste, mixing water or coconut liquor with it, and adding ripe plantains, bananas, sour paste, etc. As I have mentioned sour paste, I will proceed to describe what it is. Breadfruit, by what I can find, remains in season only 9 or 10 of their 13 months, so that a reserve of food must be made for those months when they are without it. To do this, the fruit is gathered when just upon the point of ripening, and laid in heaps where it undergoes a fermentation, and becomes disagreeably sweet. The core is then taken out, which is easily done, as a small pull at the stalk draws it out entire, and the rest of the fruit thrown into a hole dug for that purpose, generally in their houses, the sides and bottoms of which are neatly lined with grass. The whole is covered with leaves and heavy stones laid upon them. Here it undergoes a second fermentation and becomes sourish, in which condition it will keep, as they told me, many months. Custom has, I suppose, made this agreeable to their palates, though we disliked it extremely. We seldom saw them make a meal without some of it in some shape or another. As the whole making of this mahi, as they call it, depends upon fermentation, I suppose it does not always succeed. It is done at least always by the old women, who make a kind of superstitious mystery of it. No one except the people employed by them is allowed to come even into that part of the house where it is. I myself spoiled a large heap of it, only by inadvertently touching some leaves that lay upon it, as I walked by the outside of the house where it was. The old directress of it told me that from that circumstance it most certainly would fail, and immediately pulled it down before my face, who did less regret the mischief I had done, as it gave me an opportunity of seeing the preparation, which perhaps I should not otherwise have been allowed to do. To this plain diet, prepared with so much simplicity, salt water is the universal sauce. Those who live at the greatest distance from the sea are never without keeping it in large bamboos set up against the sides of their houses. When they eat, a coconut shell full of it always stands near to them, into which they dip every morsel, especially of fish, and often leave the whole soaking in it, drinking at intervals large sups out of it with their hands, so that a man may use 1/2 a pint of it at a meal. They also have a sauce made of kernels of coconuts, fermented till they dissolve into a buttery paste, and beat up with salt water. The taste of this is very strong, and at first was to me most abominably nauseous. A very little use, however, reconciled me entirely to it, so much that I should almost prefer it to our sauces with fish. It is not common among them. Possibly it is thought ill management among them to use coconuts so lavishly, or we were on the islands at the time when they were scarce ripe enough for this purpose. Small fish they often eat raw, and sometimes large ones. I myself, by being much with them, learnt to do the same, insomuch that I have made meals often of raw fish and breadfruit, by which I learnt that with my stomach at least it agreed as well as dressed, and if anything was still easier of digestion, howsoever contrary this may appear to the common opinion of the people at home. Drink they have none but water and coconut juice, nor do they seem to have any method of intoxication among them. Some there were who drank pretty freely of our liquors, and in a few instances became very drunk, but seemed far from pleased with their intoxication, the individuals afterwards shunning a repetition of it, instead of greedily desiring it, as most Indians are said to do. End of section 19.